is actually realizing a tremendous amount of savings in the staffing account because of the consolidation. So while you didn't see huge savings in the consolidation across gen ed teachers, only one teacher, remember, difference, you will see quite a bit of change, and that equates to an overall savings when we look at the entire staff across the elementary school. So I want to begin by letting you know that the staffing plan for Mansfield Elementary School was something that was actually developed pre-referendum. In order for us to understand the real impact of moving from 3 schools to 1, we engaged in an operations study. And when we engaged in that operations study, we created a staffing plan. So how many teachers, paraeducators, administrators, custodians, secretaries, what's it going to take to run this school? It's that very staffing plan, and I kind of brought it just to show you. It's like getting a little dog-eared. But it is that very staffing plan that we started with this year when we created the staffing plan for MES. And thankfully, we found that what we identified back in 2017, I think, still holds true. We were able, I think, to create a plan that held true 4 years later because we had regular enrollment studies. And those enrollment studies, although there's some fluctuation every year, overall are pretty accurate. And so the proudest study that we looked at in 2017 gave us a pretty good indication of how many students we were going to be programming for this year. In addition, we made a commitment that you'll remember, not only to maintain class size, but to maintain programming as well. And so knowing that we had those sort of goalposts, we were able to create a plan then that's just as relevant now. Okay, so let me walk you through this. And some of this is very self-explanatory. Some of it may bring up some questions, so feel free to interrupt me because I want to make sure you understand it. So we're going to start just with certified positions, and then I'm going to show you the non-certified positions. So currently we have 3 principals, obviously. Well, the new elementary school is staffed for 2 administrators, with the assumption being that 1 would be principal and 1 would be an assistant principal. So in the principal line, I removed 2 principals, and in the assistant principal line, I added a principal. So you can see that far right column shows the change. The number of teachers teaching pre-K is not changing. It will still be a half-day program as it is now, allowing for 6 sections of pre-K. You are probably interested to know that we did not have a waiting list this year. I'm looking at the back. We did not have a waiting list this year in our pre-K program, nor did we have one last year, I don't think either. Or maybe not even the year before. I mean, it has been a few years since we have had children in our community who want to attend our pre-K program, and we haven't had space for them. So we're comfortable with those 3 classes.
I have a question about preschool then. Number 1, which is sort of an aside, but can be just a yes or no. Is our preschool NIAC accredited?
No.
Okay.
And that was a conscious decision on our part about 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay.
It had been accredited. We did not find the accreditation was supporting any development of the program.
One of the things that I know that helps the community to increase its enrollment is very often its preschool program, because once you are wedded to a school, you want to continue there. And it worries me that we have not had an increase in our preschool enrollment. So I'm wondering if we think that's because of numbers of children or because of the pandemic and the difficulty that parents find in bringing their children, because they're different kinds of problems.
I would say it's both of those and a third, which is that Mansfield families have opportunities for several high-quality preschool programs right in town.
Yes, I know from personal experience.
So that is probably a third factor. But we definitely saw a reduction in our numbers last year because of the pandemic. And while they bounced back a little bit this year, you'll notice that the Prouder projections actually put us higher next year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I'll continue on this chart. The number of certified staff for gen ed classrooms in grades K through 4 will be reduced from the high of, or the current number of 30 currently, to 29, as I shared with you on the previous slide. And that little asterisk lets you know that that change is enrollment driven. That's the only reason why we're making that change.
Kelly, so we have a classroom in the building for that third section.
Sixth section.
Sorry, for the sixth section of third grade.
Correct.
So what will happen with that classroom next year?
We think we will use that as an additional space for related arts, because our art and music programs have one classroom each, and there will be some times during the day when there will be more than 2 classes of those related arts going on. So we'll use that swing space.
Okay, so in future years, it would be more than likely becoming a third grade classroom. So it will be stocked supply wise,
Yes.
even though we're only having 5 sections, we'll stock 6 sections worth of classrooms.
Yeah, more importantly, 6 sets of classroom furniture and
Okay, great.
all of that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to special education. One of the other commitments we made was that we would maintain special education programming to meet the needs of students at that time. That's what we do every year. You may remember about 3 or 4 years ago, we reduced a teacher because our numbers of special education students had declined. Well, as the number of students with special education needs has increased, that teacher needed to come back. As we look at our needs for next year, we believe that we can maintain the current level of staffing. There may be some readjustment. We'll talk about that a little bit later in our workshops with some of those teachers, but this building will be staffed with 6 special education teachers. However, in the area of special services, moving from 3 schools to 1 allows us an opportunity to consolidate some of our resources. Again, this is based on student need. So the only reason we're reducing some speech and language personnel is because we have, when you bring everybody into one building, more staff than is needed to meet the speech and language needs per individual education plans of the students moving on. Should something happen over the summer and more children move in, or speech and language is one of those areas that's often affected by needs of preschool children, and we don't have enough staffing, well, we'll have the opportunity to add back some speech and language services, because we have a little bit of contingency in the budget, but we also have some contingency in our special ed reserve fund. So we have some flexibility there. And I think that's important to think about as you go through the staffing. I know that there can be concerns whenever you reduce staffing, but know that we've tried to think through all those different scenarios. Another area where we'll achieve some savings from consolidation is in what I've identified here as other services. These are general education services, reading specialist or coaching positions, and enrichment. Currently, we have 1 of each of those in each of the 3 buildings, and we believe this building will be well served with 2 of each of those in this new building. Yes.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I have to go back one. Just a quick question about the school psychologists.
Yep.
You had mentioned last week in the overview that we were adding an additional school psych. So that includes, so the 4 staffing includes the speech and language and school psych,
Yeah.
including that additional.
I know so now I'm going to confuse you a little bit.
Or does that go in the special ed budget?
No, so I have tried. So the position that I talked about last week is actually a position that will work across both schools, and so I've not included it on this slide, but you will see that it's going to come up later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question
Yep.
too? With the speech and language position, I completely understand and respect reducing the person to meet the needs that we currently have and show, but those positions are really hard to fill right now. If we did drop the position and needed to add someone back, would that be problematic?
It would be problematic anyways because one of our speech and language clinicians has announced her retirement.
Oh, great.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Did
I
you have a question?
Yes, I
Okay.
did. I know that these numbers are based upon consolidating the school and the numbers of kids coming in. But with the pandemic, many districts have seen an increase in needs that students have for services like reading support,
hmm
for SEL support,
Right.
because of the things that they've gone through.
Yeah.
And I worry that if we are cutting some of these positions, I mean, there's nothing we can do about someone retiring, and congratulations to them. But are we going to be able to provide the needs that our students have as we are taking them from the school that they know, moving them into another school at a time when we are all experiencing difficulties?
Yeah. So I'm going to address some additional positions that are being proposed to support students because of the pandemic. So can we come back to that question after I get to that part? Martha?
Yeah, it's probably included in your answer when you go farther. ESSER money helps with some of the tutors
Yes.
and reading specialists and so forth.
Yes.
Alright,
And so that's not
Probably wrapped into, it's not shown here.
not represented
Yeah,
here.
but
Good point.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
So there are other positions in the schools currently, right, that are not showing up here because they're grant funded. Okay, so I think I'm on special areas. So that's the next part of the staffing that we looked at. How many teachers do we need to provide the same level of programming that students receive currently, which means 3 classes of PE a week or an hour and a half of PE a week, a full hour of art a week, a full hour of music a week, and then our world language programming in grades 2 through 4. In order to provide the same level of programming that students have now when we are in one school, we will go from needing 9 teachers to needing 7.6 teachers. So a reduction of 1.4 positions. The other question that I'm often asked when I talk about this is, does that mean somebody's going to be without a job? And we've been preparing for this for 3 years. So as we've hired, we've let people know that this was a possibility. And so there will be no surprises. And we've done some things to keep some positions open, which I'll show you on the next slide. Or we've been fortuitous enough to have some retirements. So there will actually be very few people who will lose a job because of these reductions. There will be some, but it will be fewer than you might think. And then the last position I want to mention to you is library. And this one is another one that's a little bit confusing. You may recall that for many years, Mansfield schools and Mansfield town have had a shared library media position. It's a person who works part-time in the schools and part-time in the town library. And it was designed originally to really support that integration of services across those two entities. As our needs in the library have changed, that part-time librarian who used to try to service all 3 schools has recently been servicing 1 school. And we hired not certified librarians, but people with degrees in library science. Usually these are people who've had experience in municipal libraries to work part-time in our other 2 schools. So those positions go away, those library science professionals, but that part-time librarian position that we have with the town, we actually want to increase that to a full-time librarian solely to serve Mansfield schools, so that our library now, which will be servicing well over 500 children, will have a full-time library media certified, school-certified library media specialist. So that's the change in library. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to move on to the non-certified positions. We have 4 secretaries that work across our 3 schools. I could explain to you how that works, but it's a little confusing, so trust me that we have 4 secretaries that work across our 3 schools. We will have 3 secretaries next year. that should be adequate to service the needs of a school of this size. Again, this happens to be one of those positions where we've kept an open position. We had a secretarial position actually here in central office that opened up this fall. We've hired it with a short-termer so that we have an openings for a transfer next year. So again, we don't have to eliminate anyone's job. Similarly, in our nursing staff, we have, of course, 3 nurses. We can adequately staff this building with 1.5 nurses. That is the same staffing level that we've had at the middle school for years. And we have openings in our nursing ranks, and we just received a retirement announcement today. So there will be no person that loses a permanent position among our nurses either. And the same thing with custodians. We currently have 6 custodians. We only need 4. We have a couple that have expressed their intention to retire. We think we'll be good there. And then the libraries, because they were staffed by these part-time library science professionals, we have had at our elementary schools paraeducators who maintain the library so that they can be open all day, every day. And we've had 1 in each building, and we will only need 1 of them next year to support the full-time librarian. Then we have a series of paraeducators who support our gen ed programs. Our preschool program, which has 2 paras in each classroom. Our kindergarten program, which has 1 para in every classroom. Those that provide reading intervention through a program called SWEET, and then others that provide support generally across all of the classrooms. In total, we see a reduction of 2 of those. Those both happen to be reductions because of enrollment. 1 kindergarten classroom will be eliminated next year, so that para position goes away. And this year we had only 1 second grade class at Southeast School. And because the numbers inched up just above our class size guidelines, we added a paraeducator to that classroom, and so that the need for that para goes away. So again, the reduction in paras is only enrollment driven. It's really not consolidation driven. And then our special education paras are always determined per student need, and so there'll be no change there.
Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry, Catherine has a question.
Yes, go ahead.
On your library para, are you saying that 2 people are going to lose their job there?
I didn't hear the last part.
On the
Oh, will
library,
people lose their jobs? No, we will reassign those people to open positions. We have some open positions now, and we have generally quite a bit of turnover in our para positions every summer, so we do not anticipate any job loss.
thank you.
Susanna?
No, we're good. I just was responding to Catherine's question.
Okay.
Kelly, I've said this before and I'd like to say it again. I think we're all very appreciative of how sensitive you've been over the years about staff, excuse me, losing their jobs. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure everyone's concerned about that.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. We've tried for sure. Okay. So let me move on to Mansfield Middle School, and then I'm going to talk about some of the proposed additions to support some of the many things that you all have just asked about. But I do want to let you know that there are some changes at the middle school as well. Due to declining enrollment in grade 8, the staffing plan moves from 7 grade 8 teachers to 6 grade 8 teachers. However, we'd like to take that grade 8 position, I don't know the person yet, but the position, and use it as a literacy interventionist. By reassigning that position to a literacy interventionist for the upper grades, it allows us to provide some support, largely due to what these children have experienced during the pandemic. Currently, we are using some tutors from one of our federal grant programs to support children in 5th grade and some 6th graders as well. And in addition, we do have a staff member who provides direct intervention support to gen ed students also. But she's one teacher rather, for 500 children. And what we're finding this year, and those of you who work in schools, I'm sure are finding the same thing, it's not just the skills that students lost during what I call this period of pandemic schooling, but it's also many other things: social interactions, self-directedness, understanding of how to engage in work, right? Motivation, right? So all kinds of things. We know that some of these other programs that we provide either require students to leave their classroom to receive the support, or we have to find a way during the school day to squeeze in a little more instruction. Well, you can imagine the last thing your 12 or 13-year-old probably wants is to be pulled out of a classroom or told we got to find a half an hour in your day to receive some intervention. So Candace is going to talk with you about this a little bit more this evening, but the middle school is looking at a co-taught model that would allow us to provide 2 teachers within classrooms in 7th and 8th grade during the regular literacy instructional periods, to provide that just-in-time instruction for students and to offer more small group or individual instruction that can be very closely tied to the instruction that's happening in the classroom at the time.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear that. I think pulling students out is stigmatizing.
Can be.
It can be, and the kids are labeled,
Right.
and it's just not an age group where that's a good thing to do. Well, that's not good at any age group. Kids are particularly sensitive in middle school.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So Candace will tell you a little bit more about that when she comes up to
Can I
present
ask
the middle school
a
budget.
question not about your slide, but someone recently had asked me about the curriculum specialist positions at the middle school, and I'm not familiar with them.
Curriculum specialist. Not sure what they're referring to. We don't
No.
have anybody
Okay.
with that title.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, I didn't know. So,
We do have district-wide people, like we have, we don't call them curriculum specialists, but we have a district-wide reading consultant and we have a district-wide math and science specialist. I don't know if they were referring to those positions, but those have been in place for a long time and they service us across all of our schools.
okay. Thanks.
So additional proposed staffing in this budget include a few other positions as well. The first is a technology integrationist position, and you've probably heard me speak about this in the past. This is a position that we actually added last school year when we were dealing with remote instruction and hybrid instruction. And it was incredibly helpful to our families and to our students and, of course, to our teachers. What we discovered was that teachers were using technology much more effectively in their classroom, not just for the remote instruction, but for regular day-to-day instruction. And we'd been hearing, of course, from staff for years that they just needed time and support to understand all of the tools that were available to them to know how to really bring technology into instruction. We continued the position this year, and it was a position that we funded through one of our federal grants. Well, it's really been an incredibly important position to the district, and I will say that you see much more effective and authentic technology use in our classrooms, and you see teachers understanding how to use technology in new ways. So we actually think that it's probably a position that we should keep, not just one that we have during the time of the pandemic or during the limited time that we will have funding. Remember, this funding pretty much goes away next year. And while we were very sensitive to adding positions through the grants that we wouldn't want to get rid of, this is one of those that actually became almost too good. And so Jamie Russell will give you more details when he presents his budget next week. But the idea is this year, when we are experiencing some savings in staffing, may be the right time to bring in an integrationist into the operating budget. And we also have had different people in that position, and in the event that we have a new person in the position next year, it will be much easier to find an applicant if this is not a short-term grant-funded position. So again, you'll hear more about that next week, but I can answer any questions you might have tonight as well. Martha?
Is this person a certified teacher?
Yes.
Or is this more a person who just really understands technology?
No, and that's the beauty of this position is that it is a certified teacher. So the focus of the position is supporting instruction and supporting our teaching and learning through our curriculum.
That was my question. I think it's so important that it is a certified
Yeah.
member of the staff because they not only understand the technology, but they also understand the instruction. That said, Mr. Barlow was my personal technology integrationist when we worked together.
That's often the way it works. Okay, the next position gets to your question earlier, Susanna, about the psychologist. So you know that one of the studies we embarked upon this year is a review of our entire special services program, looking not just at the services we provide to students who have been identified with special needs, but also to students who need any level of support in our schools. And while we don't have the final report yet, we thought we would have it by now, but it was a little more complex. We have seen some of the broad recommendations. And we know that some of the things that are going to be recommended to us revolve around being able to provide more supports earlier on to students. Couple that with the fact that, again, you've seen this in the media, you've possibly even experienced it in your own homes, that the effect of the pandemic has really had quite an impact upon children's social and behavioral development. And certainly our schools are no different than any of the others that you hear about. The numbers of students with behavioral and mental health needs feels much more significant this year than it has in past years. And in fact, we have experienced the need to provide more intensive schooling to more children this year than we have in the past, meaning that we have identified more students who have needed the services of an outside specialized school beyond services beyond what we can provide. And it's not been our practice in the past to not be able, or not our experience, I should say, in the past, to not be able to meet the needs of those students in our schools. And I think all of this, again, is related very much to what children have experienced over the last 2 years. So what we'd like to do is reassign that psychologist position that is the one that was being removed from the elementary school to create a district-wide psychologist that really focuses on behavioral and mental health needs and supports students, families, and teachers across the 2 schools. Again, Shameen Patwa will give you more details on this next week when she presents her budget, but there's a little thumbnail sketch of what we're thinking about for this position. Jeanette?
Now, generally, the school psychologist works with students who receive special education services. But right now, we have a lot of children who need those services who do not have an IEP. Will this professional work with any children?
Our school psychologists currently work with any child.
I think it's a wonderful thing to
Yep.
do. And is this something that we're having in the budget as we go through this difficult time, or is it something that you think will continue through the budget in years to come?
Well, I think that's to be determined. One of the other things that you will hear about when we do get the special ed report is that we also are looking at trying to create a program in each of our schools next year that provides a little more focused support to students with behavioral and mental health needs. So rather than all students identified with special education needs as being in just a resource room type of program, we would have a specialized program in each school that could provide some more intensive supports. So we see this psychologist working very closely with those classrooms. And again, we're creating those because that's the need now. We don't know if that will be the need in 4 years or 5 years. So that's the thing with our special services program, is that we've really been able to be flexible based on the needs of students.
So this is a school psychologist, not a BCBA.
Correct, not a BCBA, but somebody who would provide some similar supports. The advantage, so a BCBA, for those of you who don't know that terminology, is professional, often somebody who was either a special education teacher or a psychologist, who has received some very specialized training in knowing how to support, how to create behavioral plans and provide behavioral supports to students. And the BCBAs usually work in consult with the classroom and special education teachers. The advantage to the psychologist being in this position is that psychologists often have similar skills, perhaps not quite as developed, but they also know how to do counseling, right? And they know how to do family systems support. So we think we can get even more from this
No,
program.
I think you'll have a much more hands-on, involved within the community approach.
Right. Martha?
So, would this person still be working with our own support system in Mansfield? Because we use the Mansfield town team.
Yes.
Would they still be linking with?
Absolutely. And so that's another thing that not everybody may be aware of, is that we have a really tight relationship with youth services. And a few years ago, the town agreed to add an additional social worker to the youth service department to support schools specifically. And so, yes, we have been working with them to have a team approach, and this would, yes, be somebody that would work with them. Okay, let me move on. A couple other positions. So you've heard me talk about this one before, Director of Teaching and Learning. It's been a very long time since the central office here has added any staff, and we have engaged in quite a bit of complex teaching and learning work. Our approach to this has been to divide the work up among our administrators and our teachers, and that has worked very well for us. But we are losing some of that administrator capacity because we are going to have, we're going from 3 small elementary schools to 1 larger, much larger elementary school, and reducing certainly the number of administrators as well. And so I think for many, many reasons, it is time for Mansfield to return to having a second administrator in central office. I think the last time you had that here was probably about 15 years ago or more. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find too many districts of this size, even though we're small, but you'd be hard-pressed to find too many districts of this size without a second person in your central office. It's really focused on the work of supporting all things teaching and learning. And so you can see, and I told you last week that I've not developed a full job description yet, but you can see the responsibilities would include supporting curriculum and assessment development, everything related to implementing the curriculum and our instructional practices, monitoring student performance, advancing professional learning, and supporting the superintendent in all kinds of things that are related to teaching and learning. There are grants that need to be written and followed through on. There are documents that need to be created that articulate our work, and on and on. So this would really offer the superintendent a partner to engage in this work. Okay, no questions? And the last position is a custodial supervisor position, and I'll give Alan Corson an opportunity when he's here next week to respond to any questions you may have about this as well. But this is a position that he has requested, and I just want to explain a little bit why. Our facilities department, as you are well aware, manages both town buildings and school buildings. And they don't only manage the custodial services, they also have a full complement of what we call maintainers. These are tradespeople, electricians, plumbers. In the past, we had a carpenter, people who can help to maintain the buildings. And all of those staff are overseen by the director of facility and the assistant director of facility. Well, over the last few years, we've had some turnover in our maintainers, and we've been able to hire some pretty skilled tradespeople to the point where you may remember about a year and year or a year and a half ago, we replaced the air conditioning unit in the auditorium. And we bid that project out to buy the air conditioner and to have it installed. And it was going to be, north of $150,000. And Alan came to me and said, our guys think they can install this. If we hire a crane for a day to get that unit up on the roof, we have the skills to actually install this unit. And they did. And it saved the town a tremendous amount of money. So our crew is able to do quite a bit of maintenance work, but they also have a full custodial crew that needs to be, whose work needs to be supported. And our assistant director of facility ends up doing that work instead of using his skills in HVAC to continue to support maintenance. So by bringing in a supervisor for custodial services, it allows our facilities department to engage in even more maintenance, and it will provide better support to our custodians. It's a position that we would share with the town because all of our custodial and maintenance services are 50-50, and so we would only assume half of the cost of this position. Okay, so
Yeah, EO Smith wouldn't be involved in that at
no,
all.
we
because
don't
it's
share.
regional.
We
Yeah.
don't share custodial with EO.
No, I didn't think, I didn't
No.
know if they were tagging on for this or not. Okay, thank
No,
you.
we do not. No. So again, just want to close this out by letting you know that the opportunity to consolidate has provided us with quite a lot of savings. Tonight I'm talking with you about the staffing savings, but you'll hear next week about operational savings as well. One thing that I mentioned last week that I wanted to follow up on is I told you that had it not been for the reductions and the other operating savings, we'd be looking at a budget increase with the positions, that we need in 3 elementary schools, and some of these additions. We'd be looking at a budget that was probably 5 or 6% over current operating costs. So I asked Charmaine to help me just calculate this for real to make sure my numbers were right. And if next year we were operating 4 schools and we were staffing them the way they are currently staffed, no new positions, just staffing 4 schools the way they're currently staffed, you can see in that second column there the cost of salaries and the cost of medical benefits. By going to 2 schools, you can see a comparative cost of salaries and medical benefits. It's over $1 million in savings. Or if you think about the budget being $24 million, $240,000 is 1% of the budget. That $1 million plus of savings is about 4.3% of our budget. So my calculation or my estimate that it would be more like 5 or 6% was pretty close. So I just wanted you to be aware that that is the change in budget. Okay, so
And I'll just say that's not, of course, like that's not just this year, but that's for all of our years
Yeah,
moving forward.
moving
So
forward.
it's not like, we're just recognizing the savings this year. So it's very
Yep.
terrific.
excellent point. Okay, at this time, I'm going to invite middle school administrators. I don't know if you're both coming or just Candace is coming up, and our principal for Mansfield Elementary School to come to the table, and they're going to walk you through the budget book. We're going to start with Candace and give her an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about this literacy position, and then we'll open up our books and start to take a look at line items.
So good evening. As Kelly had mentioned, I'd like to propose to you this evening a position that allows us to move the grade 8 teaching position to a literacy intervention position for students in grades 7 and 8. The intent in this position is to support the reading needs of students that we've begun to see as a result of COVID. Not unlike many schools around us, some of the discontinuity of learning has had an impact on some students. Kelly's mentioned early this evening how they engage, self-directedness, and I would even call it academic endurance. We're noticing a greater need to provide more skill-focused reading instruction to some of our students in grades 7 and 8, and the model that we'd like to propose would allow us the flexibility to do such while still having them part of the regular classroom instruction. In this model, it would allow for 2 co-taught reading classes in grades 7 and 8, as well as some additional time dedicated to support reading instruction in other core academic classes, social studies as an example. The model we propose would allow us to meet students' needs where they're at. And so instead of pulling them out of the classroom, we would actually go into the classroom and restructure, provide for small group instruction, really meeting their needs and personalizing their learning. So to be clear, this is not a remedial class. The co-teaching model would allow for 2 skilled teachers of reading to tailor instruction and group students to meet their specific instructional needs while still addressing core reading content at that grade level. And that's a key component. We know that access to more individualized attention interactions with the teachers allows for increased emphasis on cognitive strategies and study skills that leads to improved academic performance. And by design, the model intentionally builds in more opportunity for students to practice the reading skills and strategies that grow reading proficiency. So the access to more frequent small group instruction and timely feedback, we believe will create an environment where students see themselves as readers. And we believe the model helps students to grow the skills and confidence in reading while also still building in that academic endurance, while building on their ability to be self-directed and to engage in the work. And a piece of that is about relationship. And when you're able to offer small group instruction, frequent check-in and feedback, you build that relationship that students need right now, and that they believe in themselves and they believe that they can do this. So we believe that this would really support the learning environment for students in grade 7, from some of our students in grade 7 and 8 that we see that would really benefit from that. And we know that the net effect for the learner would be a more positive learning experience and improved reading proficiency. So our hope is providing that this model would provide an instructional approach that offers more specialized skill-based reading instruction in the regular education setting and would allow us to personalize the learning experience for these students. And we really think that this model would meet the needs of some of our learners that we're seeing presently in grades 7 and 8.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Absolutely, this sounds like exactly what we need. I'm just thinking to scheduling.
Mhm.
Is this going to result in having classes that have a higher percentage of kids that have these needs? Are we going to be able to keep the classes as balanced as possible?
Yeah, I think what you do is you know which students would benefit from this instructional approach, and then you intentionally build the schedule in 7th and 8th with this in mind. Where do these sections need to land so that we can appropriately staff several classes to make sure that there's not conflicts across the grade level scheduling. And we've done some of that already in light of the fact that we have students that take out of advanced math classes, so out of their grade level. I don't think it's going to skew anything as far as having what you might call a class that has more instructional needs in a particular classroom. I think what it does is it allows us to really intentionally schedule kids. At the middle school, we have really personalized scheduling for years about really thinking about each individual student, what they need, where their schedule best lands. This really allows us to think very intentionally up front about where are kids at, what do they need, and who would best be suited to be in a class that's co-taught. I think it provides us some really good opportunities to work with students within the regular ed setting, but also structured at times that if they need more consistent feedback, if they need more small group instruction to build their capacity to get there, to provide that model for them. And I think back to last year, particularly in grade 8, when they were in hybrid instruction for a chunk of the year, they had class sizes of 13, and teachers were able to do some of this work. with larger classes and one person, it's sometimes a challenge. And so building two people in that co-teach, you're collaborating together, you're thinking intentionally about the content that you're teaching. What are the skills that we want to make sure that our students are proficient in? Where are our students within that classroom on that band of skills? And what do they need individually? And how do we meet them where they're at? And how do we help them to grow the skills and to feel successful in what they're doing?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you can go.
So in former times, a student would be pulled out of a classroom and go to a specialist. What happens to that specialist now, when no longer are the students using that as a resource? They're staying in the classroom.
So I think there's still a need for the specialist. We're going to start there because there are still students that have reading needs that exceed even the needs in this particular model that will still need that very specialized specific instruction. So I don't think it negates the need for the specialist. This group of students, for the most part, are non-identified students that we're talking about here. So these are students that don't have an individualized academic plan, but they're definitely demonstrating a need that even exceeds some intervention work that would be 3 times a week. They're needing more frequent daily feedback, and they're needing the feedback to support their academic performance in the classroom.
So there would still be pull-out times. Some
Yeah.
students would still be pulled out of classroom.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the way your program, your academic support program works is that students attend an academic support program in lieu of something else.
Correct. In lieu of world language. Yeah.
I think Kelly first and then Jeanette. Thank you.
Thanks. So since this is a permanent position, I think it's a great idea to help support learners. There's definitely gaps that have happened, and I think catching kids before they leave for high school is super appropriate. But adding this as a permanent position, I can't help but use my early childhood brain that really builds from the bottom up. Instead of having this as a 7th and 8th grade position, would you see this staying there and catching kids on the way out, or evolving and moving to 5th and 6th grade? Just talk me through that a little.
Sure. So remember, as we mentioned earlier on, we have a reading tutor position in 5th and 6th grade that's been very intentional, particularly this year, about really thinking about and identifying students who have some learning gaps and needs. That model seems to work really well in 5th and 6th grade. We presently don't have anything that for 7th and 8th grade, but we're seeing a need not only from students moving up within our program, but also from students who have moved in this last year. And we're needing more support to really meet them where they're at. And you're right, before high school. And so at the present, I see an appropriate place to be in 7th and 8th grade, knowing that we have reading tutors in 5th and 6th. And our model of reading instruction in 5th grade, we have 2-person teaching teams. Remember, they're K-6 cert. Everyone is a teacher of reading, looking at teaching those reading skills very intentionally, not only in the reading class, but also thinking about how we also reinforce those reading skills within our social studies and science content. And that's really a benefit of having those 2-person teaching teams in 5th grade. And in 6th grade, they're 3-person teaching teams. But again, it's that same focus, really taking those reading skills that we're teaching in reading and reinforcing them in science and social studies.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful perspective.
Wait. Jeanette, I believe you have a question.
I just want to put my reading consultant cap on and say that I think this is really something that's very important, especially right now. When kids are moving to 7th, 8th grade, the kinds of reading responsibilities that they face are very different from what they faced when they were younger. And someone may have been quite a proficient reader in the early, middle, or really intermediate grades, and then find themselves at a loss when they come to that greater expectation for independence when they get to 7th and 8th grade. And then when we couple that with the difficulties of the pandemic, the lack of stamina, motivation, I think this is a really good way to handle that. Because as we already said, we're already set to take care of those kids who need specific strategies help. This is for those kids who need that extra push because of where they are in school, but also where we are within the pandemic. So I would wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Catherine, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'd just like some clarification, please. You said that the specialist was just for 5th and 6th grade, and that in 7th and 8th grade, there really wasn't anything? Did I understand you correctly?
No, Catherine, what we're talking about, we have what you're talking about is academic support reading intervention is in grades 5 through 8. This year, in addition to that, because we had some additional needs that we didn't think really needed academic support, but they needed a little bit of a 6-week intervention, we have reading tutors that are doing some of that work in addition to supporting academic support. This position really is looking at those students that need a little bit more support as we're getting into reading in core content areas where we're really expecting a greater degree of independence. They're not there yet. And so how do we build in an extra teacher to co-teach to help strengthen those skills, to develop their ability to work with independence and confidence before they're moving on to high school? But we do have a reading specialist in grades 5 and 6.
And the reading tutor program is through ARP funds, and that is outside of the regular classroom instruction, and it services children primarily in grades 5 with a few grade 6 students, correct?
Correct.
So, sorry, Candace, because
That's okay.
it's hard to follow you at times. So what is in grade 5 and 6?
In grade 5 and 6, we have reading academic support. Students are scheduled to take that
Okay,
class.
reading academic support.
Yep.
You don't have reading academic support in 7th and 8th grade.
No, we have reading academic support in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. This
Okay, then
would
I'm
be
not
in
sure why
addition
you
to
keep
that.
breaking it down to 5th and 6th. I guess that's what I'm finding a little
In grades
confusing.
5 and 6, we have reading tutors this year,
Mm-hmm.
and no reading tutors in grades 7 and 8. That was an intentional move on our part, given the amount of funding that we had. So we put the support with the youngest students.
Which makes absolute sense.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Martha?
With this new position, would these specialists meet with, say, the 9th grade team at EO Smith, and so that they can discuss what they see, the 9th grade staff at EO Smith sees the needs are with the incoming students? Because I think sometimes there's a big gap, what is expected at EO Smith and when they leave the middle school. I mean, is there value to that?
I think at this time, we intend to really look at where students' reading skills are at with assessments that we have, and really focus on what we know that they need as far as comprehension, ability to make sense of text in that work. And that does lead into where they go at EO Smith with being reading for independence in the content areas. We haven't had much opportunity to articulate with them lately. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't be on the table.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we're all set on the position, we're going to move into looking at the line items in your budget book. And I'll remind you that we are in section 3, the general education section. So if you want to open your books to section 3, and just to let you know how the budget came to be, every year the principals begin by looking at expenditures over the last 3 years. They consider current program needs as well as the district and school goals. And this year, our elementary people had to think about the implications of the new school as well. And then they look at each line and identify reductions or expenditures that are new. And again, as you saw, we develop our staffing proposal based on actual and projected enrollment. So that's the budget development process for elementary. There are just a few highlights in the elementary budget this year. You'll notice that we've consolidated all services and contracts, that the supply accounts have pretty much held steady from the current year. One thing that is different is the library media accounts used to be in the district management section of your budget because they were single accounts that worked across all 4 schools. Now that we have separate library media personnel, we've moved those budgets into respectively the elementary and middle school budgets, and the elementary budget maintains all professional learning funds. Middle school, same process. Look at expenditures from the last 3 years, think about school needs and district goals, identify the reductions and additional expenditures in each line, look at enrollment. Middle school highlights this year include how we're spending text money. Again, the movement of the library and the increased use of some instructional software, which you'll see some additions for. I'm sure Candace can speak to that. And again, we're maintaining all professional learning funds and our after-school and athletic programs. So with that, we're going to start on page 33, I believe.
And I'll take it away from to get us started. Candace and I, along with our administrators, teachers, and all staff at MMS and our 3 elementary schools, want to thank you for your work over the years to support the work that we've been able to do within our classrooms. The budget has been supportive to teachers being able to support students with their various needs. So we kick off this season again with, taking a time to carefully look through each page. Candace and I will spend time discussing pages that have significant changes. The ones that are kind of standard, we will move through pretty quickly, okay? So I'll get started looking at the page 33. You'll see there's 0 change suggested for the language arts and reading position. We're looking to maintain that budget.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please,
I'm
yes.
so sorry. This might be a next year line item, but I know that there's some changes to the Reader's Workshop and model and the kind of around professional development, and I know that the model is changing. Do you anticipate some future budget needs for that, or not right now?
We're not anticipating.
Okay.
I imagine you're talking about the right to read legislation.
Some, but also just that I know Reader's Workshop is also making some significant changes.
Yeah.
So themselves. So
Got
I
it.
think not the right to read legislation, but the program itself is making some significant changes. So I just wondered if that was something that we had considered, or if that's not. I wasn't quite sure where they were with that, so I just wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, you may remember that over the last couple of years, this line item has increased quite a bit because we have funds in here to be sure that every year we can update our text libraries. And so I would imagine any of those changes that happen, these monies will suffice to help us make those changes.
I think just to make a point too, many of these line items, when you look at, there are definitely pandemic effects on the 1920 and the 2021 lines. So when you look at what's been spent, please keep that in mind.
At the middle school level, you'll notice that there's a $5,100 increase in the language arts reading budget. Part of that is that we purchased the Newsella software 2 years ago as part of what we were doing to support instruction, particularly in reading and in social studies and science during pandemic times. We found that software is a really strong software to be using, and we've now built it into our budgets across the 3 budget areas. Additionally, we made a shift this past year in 5th grade that all teachers in 5th grade are now teachers of reading. We really believe strongly in the importance of being, if you are a teacher of reading, that just improves your skill set in teaching reading and instruction across the content areas. But that also means that we need to budget to support classroom libraries and the annual updating of text and print materials in their classrooms. So the budget increase really does take into account the need to continue to update their classroom libraries.
Moving on to page 35, we'll continue with world language, Spanish, in second, third, and fourth grade. And at this point, teachers are looking to compile additional Spanish books to add to their libraries. Actual text. Susanna?
I'm interrupting with a question from Catherine.
Sorry about that. I was just curious, what is the increase in membership fees and professional dues? It's basically a double an increase. On page 34.
Yeah, so Catherine, there are several different memberships that teachers belong to. Remember that this budget covers teachers of English language arts in grades 5 through 8. So that increase really is reflective of membership fees that they would request to be a part of for professional membership organizations.
I understand what it's for. What I'm asking is why it has doubled. Why has it gone from 150 to 300?
Right, because we now have more teachers teaching reading.
Okay. Thank you.
World language at the middle school, there's no change in our budget. As a reminder, we went to exploratory world languages at the 5th grade level last year, and students now spend 3 years in their target language. But they're finding that this budget, they're able to accommodate the adjustment in their programming.
Okay, moving on to page 37. It says tiny budget there for health and safety. Oftentimes, money is used to help support teaching materials for students in health issues in the classroom that is co-taught actually often by the nurse or the classroom teacher.
Excuse me, Catherine, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. When are we going to start teaching the languages, page 35, to pre-K through 4? Because children of that young age are really good little sponges for learning languages.
So
And this
our
is
world
something
language,
I've mentioned before. Nothing happens.
our world language program begins in grade 2. And we've done that for many years. Am I right?
Many years.
Just
Yeah.
looking at Lauren.
Yeah, many of our local school districts, it's not offered till much later. We're actually ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm just saying, isn't it time we start looking at possibly offering it earlier?
Well, it would require a staffing increase. It would require us to find time in the day. I think in the earlier grades, we're giving more of our attention to developing literacy skills. And so typically when you see what's called foreign language in the elementary school programs, they usually begin after the early literacy skills are developed in K1. And so I think that's the rationale for why those FLES programs usually begin in grade 2.
I can also speak to the current practices. These classes are in mostly Spanish in 2nd grade. So you're looking at a very advanced use of knowledge and listening skills. Teachers are especially accustomed to using their whole body language, using visual supports. You'd be amazed. I mean, I invite you anytime to come in and see what 2nd graders are doing in Spanish. It's wonderful. At this point, it feels to me like it's the appropriate age for introduction to that. But Catherine, I think it might be a good experience for you to see what it looks like. I think you'll be impressed.
Well, I remember from Goodwin, and we actually had a Spanish teacher that actually did kind of involve preschool, kindergarten, and 1st grade for a while there. And it was pretty awesome to watch.
Members, I'm just going to request that we keep our questions strictly to the budget. Otherwise, in the sake of time, we could be here for some time. So thank you.
At the middle level, there's the budget for health and safety, there's no change to. It's just a reminder that we use this for internet safety concepts as well as fire safety program at the middle school. And the internet safety concepts programming happens in grades 5 and 7.
Moving on to page 39, physical education budget. You'll see we're looking to maintain the budget for the new school. That would include a continuation of many of the awesome things that we've come to know and love from our physical education program, including ropes, including high ropes, including all sorts of fabulous programs. Any questions?
At the middle school, we also continue to maintain programming here. A major portion of our budget this year, though, will be utilized to replace archery equipment and targets that are in need of replacement. It's a highly prized program for students in grades 5 through 8, but the equipment's at the point it needs to be replaced.
Flipping to page 41, looking at an art budget here. That's also a maintaining budget. We're currently able to meet all needs with our current budget in art.
And in grades 5 through 8, the art program, there's no increase in budget, and we are able to meet all of our programming needs.
Moving forward into page 43, math. You will see that we haven't quite tapped into the budget fully in the past few years. We hope to pick that up again, moving into one school and coming together, continuing to build up our math curriculum. So there's no change.
At the middle school, you'll notice that there's an increase of $4,000. That's intentional, and I'll explain. We have a need to plan for Johns Hopkins math programming for several students in the coming year. These are students that are advanced math students, and they're also at an age that it would not be appropriate to send them to the high school. And so we have to be thinking in advance about their academic programming. And we know we have at least 4 students in that position next year, and we've accounted for several of those funding needs from our math budget, and several Shamim will speak to that come out of the enrichment budget.
Moving on to page 45, you'll see an increase in the music proposed. That position is currently a shared position, very creatively done, shared with E.O. Smith. And we have a violin teacher who comes down and is doing a fabulous job. So we've been very pleased with that position and that increase in students who are learning the violin.
And on that note of an increase at the middle school, there's no increase in the overall music budget, but we will use a large portion of our funds this year to purchase some additional full-size cellos because our membership in orchestra continues to grow and interest in playing the cello continues to grow. So we need to purchase a few additional instruments.
Moving along onto science on page 47. We are pleased with the current budget. We've been implementing NGSS standards into the classrooms. STEM teachers have been supporting that work, and we look forward to continuing that program.
And at the middle level, there's no change to the science budget. We've made some minor adjustments to certain budget lines just to more accurately reflect the spending, but overall budget remains stable.
On page 49, our social studies budget, we're looking to also maintain the current program and look forward to bringing schools together and having an opportunity to continue to deepen our social studies work.
And at the middle level, you'll note that there's a $1,500 increase in the social studies budget. As mentioned earlier, this is another area that contributes to the paying for the membership and subscription for Newsella. On the next page, we have life and consumer science. I continue to be impressed with the resourcefulness of the programming in life and consumer science. There's no increase in the budget this year, but yet you would be amazed at what kids continue to do within that program and the types of experiences that they have. And similarly, technology education is another one. No increase to the overall budget. He is recognized, as we all know, the price of wood and materials has increased quite a bit over the last year. That's caused him to be even more resourceful and to look at project work that utilizes different materials. And so they both teachers feel very confident in the budgets that they're presenting that'll cover their needs for their curriculum.
This is not quite budget, sort of budget. Kelly, you had talked last time about a day of service, and it's nice to see. Thank you for including all the service work that's done through Life and Consumer Sciences here too.
Great.
On page 53, the central services line item covers school supplies, including things like paper, pencils, glue, and those types of materials. We're suggesting a continuation of that current budget, no increase.
And for the middle school, again, we're suggesting no increase to the budget. The next page, guidance services. There's no increase to the budget. The only increase there is reflected in salaries.
Additionally, no change on page 56 as we look to build out professional development for the new school, but it won't require more funding at this point.
Professional development at the middle school. We know the last couple of years we haven't been able to spend all of those funds just to the nature of being in the pandemic. But we do see professional learning opportunities are beginning to pick up. We already have teachers that are expressing interest in being a part of those, and we see a return to utilizing this budget to support instructional programming.
Page 58 is a new line item for us for library, at least coming into the Mansfield Elementary School budget. So you'll see no history on that, but you will see at the beginning the cost to have a full-time certified librarian is a big driver of that, in addition to the various programs that are needed to keep that program running.
And you'll notice on the next page that another same example. It's just really reflecting that we're now putting the library budget into the middle school budget.
And I'll just make a note there that what we did with the library budget and the media services budget is we maintained the total that had been budgeted for in the current year and split it in half because our two schools now are about the same size.
Same story with page 60, the media services. That is a new line item back into the elementary school budget, yet it will support our work with audiovisual materials throughout the building.
Yeah, pretty much same at the middle level. We should highlight that we have a capital project request in to update our auditorium sound system.
Just backtracking a minute on pages 58 and 59 and 60, where were these expenses prior? I mean, they were somewhere else in the budget, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were in district management.
In district management. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Actually, you might remember Linda Robinson used to present those
Yeah.
pieces. So now they've come into ours. Where are we? 62?
Yeah.
You're looking at a reduction on page 62 in principal's office services. Reduction is mostly made from a reduction in an administrator and a reduction in a secretary.
At the middle level, principal's office services, there's just the program budget is just designed to maintain current programs. There's no change.
Moving on to page 64 and support services. At this point, we are looking to maintain that current program and continue to use the money. It was quite low during pandemic.
Page 65, field studies. We are hoping to have a return to field studies next year. So we certainly have this reflected in the budget. I would like to highlight that we already this year have planned some field studies where people are coming to us and using our grounds to do some field studies. So we're using some of that funding in that way this year. I am also thrilled to say that at this point in the year, we've had an after-school programs been running all year since the beginning of the year. I think back to last year where we weren't able to have after-school programs until almost I think it was the fourth quarter. It has been great to have anywhere from 20 to 25 programs running each quarter, unique opportunities for kids, and they're fully subscribed. And so it feels good to have that back in play from the very beginning of the year. Kids are doing really exciting work this year. And then the last page that we have is our athletic program. Again, really thrilled that we were able to offer our athletic programs right from the start of the school year, and looking forward to continuing to offer this program not only through winter sports, but moving on to spring sports as well.
Can I ask just a quick question about officials? Is that having a big impact on the number of like meets or games or that folks have had that students are able to do? Or
You mean access to officials?
it just said I think you were saying here it says that they're more expensive, and
Oh,
so
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
we're having a little less.
Yeah, they're more
Competition.
expensive, so you look at ways to be creative around having scrimmages, and we've offered some of those. Officials is interesting because it's not something we're just told what the cost is, and it seems every year, but we're finding ways to be creative around that. I'll say honestly, our biggest issue earlier in the year was transportation on any given day, figuring out how we were getting kids to and from events. And I will have to tell you that every school in our league was amazing at collaborating and saying, we'll bring our bus here and drop them off. We'll take your kids back there. And the bus companies were great about it too. And that seems to have settled in at this point in the year.
That's great. So no significant reduction in
No
competitions
significant
or anything
reduction.
like that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, back on page 45, we're talking about the music programs in K through 4, and prior times, and I guess even right now, these students are bused to the middle school. Is the new school paradigm going to change things?
No, we've actually changed programs this year, and the teachers come to us.
I wondered.
It's been a highly coordinated. I appreciate the number of ways that we've tried to make this work. We believe it will improve next year because there won't be so much travel. But each of the music teachers has taken on a significant amount of travel to come to students' schools to be able to provide instruction.
Also, as our music programs continue to grow, our instrumental programs, we, over the last couple of years, have pushed more of our instrumental instruction into the responsibilities of our K-4 music teachers. So some of our current music teachers have expertise in teaching instruments. And so they combine with the middle school staff. And so especially during COVID, where we've not wanted to be busing children and mixing them with lots of other children, they've just done a phenomenal job between last year virtual and outdoor instruction and this year instruction where we're bringing the teachers into the elementary schools. It's working really well.
Just a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
So it was done because of the pandemic. Is that something that you're going to continue if this ever ends? That you will continue to have the instrumental instruction at the elementary schools?
Yes, that is the plan. There's even practice rooms in the new building.
Great.
So 2 practice rooms.
Yeah, no, I just wondering for music students at Eastern and at UConn, especially in their probably 4th year, would be a great opportunity for them to come in and learn how to teach music. I mean, do we do anything like that?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we
thought
currently do have.
I thought so, but
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to, because it's extra support.
I just wanted to say how much I appreciate all of the work with the transition. I really had expected to go through the budget book and see some needed changes with moving to the new school. And it obviously will all be seamless, but this just seemed like a continuation. And I don't know how many people really look at that and can understand and acknowledge how much work and building over the last few years this has taken to make this just happen. So thank you for that, because it's a lot of work.
And it ain't over yet.
Nope. Okay. If you have no other questions for Candace and Lauren, I'll let them go back. Good.
Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you. So next week, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on special services and then the district management budget. Now, the district management budget next week will include facilities and technology and all kinds of operational line accounts. And so Charmaine will be here again next week. And so you'll hear a full complement of presentations again. And it is another opportunity for you to let us know if you have any questions on the budget. Again, if you can send us those ahead of time, we appreciate it so we can have responses ready. But I hope after this many years that I've found a way to present the budget in an understandable format. So, but don't hesitate to raise questions ahead of time. And then, of course, you'll deliberate and adopt your final budget on February 10th.
Well,
That's all I have.
I'm going to say this now, probably say it again later, but our budget reflects our priorities, and it is really heartening to see that our priorities are there to take care of the kids. So thank you for that. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yes.
Transportation needs, and you have a budget here that's nickels over last year.
Nice job, folks. Nice job. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Anything else, folks? Or I'll accept the motion to adjourn. David, thank you. Do I have a second? Jeanette, thank you. Anyone have any objections to